Well, welcome everyone. I'm Ben Robinson. I'm going to be the host tonight for Lit Live Online. Many of you know that we've been presenting Lit Live reading series in Hamilton in theaters, bars, and sometimes cafes for many years. Most recently, we had a 4-year run at the Staircase Theater on Dundern Street North, which is sadly no more. So we're still figuring out what our next physical manifestation will be, but we will keep you apprised of that process. We would like to thank our readers for signing on for tonight's reading, as well as everyone else in the audience who's joining us. Lit Live Online is a free event and is going to remain that way for the foreseeable future. Lit Live is funded by the Ontario Arts Council and the Canada Council for the Arts, and to those organizations and to our audiences, we are sincerely grateful. I would encourage our writers tonight to post sales links for their books that they're reading from in the chat feed and onto our Facebook page and our Facebook group for our reading series. We still believe strongly in selling books, and book sales are a big part of why we do this. So please take advantage of that. Technical management of tonight's event is being handled by Mr. Gary Barwin. Gary has also curated tonight's show, so if you have any problems with the lineup, he's the person to go and talk to. Thanks as well to the Lit Live committee, who are, in addition to Gary and me, Christine Michon, Susan Evans-Shaw, Jennifer Tan, Liz Tessier, and Chris Pinnell. Chris is our regular host, but he needed to take the night off, so you might see him poking around in the back, but I don't think he's going to be making much noise tonight. Like I said, we have 6 readers this evening, so tonight we'll begin with Sachiko Murakami, then we'll have Angela Rawlings and Deborah Ostrovsky, followed by a short intermission with a live musical performance by Troy Witherow. And then we'll have 3 more readings from Derek Beaulieu, Stuart Ross, and Rasika Rebalva. I'd like to begin by recognizing and acknowledging that the Lit Live online reading series is hosted in Hamilton, Ontario, and our events are part of the cultural life of a city built on the traditional territories of the Mississauga and the Haudenosaunee nations, and within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. In this particular moment, I would like to acknowledge the struggle of the Haudenosaunee people to assert their treaty rights in the midst of settler and police encroachment, and send solidarity to the land defenders at 1492 Lamback Lane. Before we get started, I should also mention a few of your personal controls in Zoom. I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, are familiar with how Zoom works now. It's kind of the only thing going these days. But if you still need a little reminder, up in the top, you can toggle between your 2 views. You'll have the gallery view, which will show you all of the participants at once. And then you will also have the speaker view, which if you have that clicked on right now, is just going to be a full screen filled with my face. And shortly after will be our lovely readers. If you want to not be viewed by others, you can use the stop video button at the bottom of the Zoom app. To restart your image after that, you just click the start video button. There's also a chat button on the side that some people have already availed themselves of. If you have any questions or comments, or you want to put little clapping hand emojis for a great part of the reading, that's the place to go and do that. If your text is a question, we'll save it till the end. And if our participants are willing, we'll have a short Q&A. If you have a technical problem, the chat is also the place to put that, and someone from our committee will try to get to you and work through that with you. Gary will look after any meeting-wide modifications that might be required. Please note that during the readings, audience microphones will be muted. Let's get started. Our first reader tonight is Sachiko Murakami. Sachiko Murakami is the author of 4 poetry collections. Her first was the Invisibility exhibit, which was published in 2008 and subsequently shortlisted for the Governor General's Literary Award. Following that debut, she wrote Rebuild and Get Me Out of Here. As a literary worker, she has edited poetry for various presses, worked for trade organizations, hosted reading series, organized conferences, sat on juries, and judged prizes. She lives in Toronto. Her latest book is Render, a collection of poetry from Arsenal Pulp Press. Please join me in welcoming Sachiko Murakami. Welcome, Sachiko.
Hi, thank you, Ben. Thank you, Ben, for hosting, and for Gary for inviting me, and for all my amazing fellow readers, and for all of you for coming. I'm going to be reading to you from Render, which is a book of poetry, mostly about my addiction and my recovery. And it takes place partly in my dreams. But this book is also haunted by the some parts of my past, some people living and some people deceased. And because it is the Day of the Dead, I thought I should read some of these poems that are kind of about the dead and being haunted. So the first poem I will read is called An Internment, and it has to do, I guess, with intergenerational trauma. An internment. An emptiness placed here by the state. Soft teeth crumble into box dust, carted to Ontario of all places. I'm going to turn this car around, I swear. Filial hunger, filial debt, filial panic disorder. In the rented house, we searched for secrets as though an object could contain truth. Instead, he arrives disguised in dreams. Some other condo, some other wife. I'm leaving. I'm sick of your shit. I'm sick of your shit credit score. Cemeteries with their enduring monuments, their old money teeth. Or 2 child-sized suitcases packed full of hunger, shoved in the closet farther back than therapy can reach. That's where this question hits lockbox. Then there's this old pick. Floss, ribbons of floss, excessive floss, enough to hang yourself with. Scrape until something bleeds. Scrape until something bleeds cash. Scratch cards, a whispering accordion, unsung lotto jingle. You think you have a home until the landlord rings. The fallow field behind the junk cars beyond the house burning. Even that insurance policy covers someone else. Or an infant feels a draft and settles back into hunger, coiling herself into the genetic sequence, until a man shudders out his loss into a mother. She unravels to make room for him. She unravels to make room for his anger. The more empty spaces inside her, the more soft places for his hurt to land. She opens again in a gesture of more. You are nothing. You're on your own. I can't do this without you. Get out of here. Come here. I need to tell you the thing he forgot to tell me about. A gap like this old broken tooth, like the gnaw of ancestral hunger or some unexplained dry plate you spent your dreams trying to ignore. The same emptiness, the same state as before. Field research. I talk about my dreams like there is some factual evidence that will survive the trauma of waking and realize the truth of my life. It's plotting linearity, the plumb line that follows a bullet's path to the next day and the day after that. I'm told I should stay present. I'm told there is safety in the outbreath, that there is space between thought and thinker I would see if only I held still long enough to measure the distance. Between here and Vancouver, most of a continent. Between a mother and a daughter, a sinew stretching city blocks. Pluck it and it twangs at the same frequency as the knotted trapezius, the first note of a dirge you've been humming since early childhood. Check her breathing. Prepare a plausible story for why you're here, a lie you will tell to tomorrow. When the doctors arrive, they will wave the usual instruments over our lives, listening for signals of the past. When does chronic bronchitis become a child you can name, a treatable condition? My outbreath, her inbreath, a chain that follows generations backwards to the first woman leaning over, heaving out sorrow into a man's empty bed. I lie down with my mother on a single mattress. Lions reach into me, following the lines I laid out for them on her dresser. We sleep for days, a litany of Tuesday mornings marching past window, facing courtyard, a place where exhaled sleep gathers. I dream I read her diary and uncover all the secrets that will answer all the questions I stand poised and ready to ask. This one is about a dream I had about my father's home where he grew up, which was Salt Spring Island, which is a island off the coast of near Vancouver. I returned, and Long Harbor is just the name of the ferry terminal there. I returned to the island of my father's childhood. I am heading inland from the safety of Long Harbor with the body in the back seat wrapped in linen, ready for the family cremation. The body of the island is wrapped in dusk, ready for the night's throttle. Where their burned house was, a new house. Slipped through family history, a snag in the shoulder where the memory was, a burned memory. Slipped through corridor, a snag of estranged aunts, and reached the end where a whale starts to expand his legacy into the air. I reached the switch to start the conveyor belt and hand over his body to his heirs, ants who harry the darkness, busy as ever. Where does the tunnel lead? I ask my sister, who carries the darkness, wary as ever. Where do dreams lead? Ask my sister, an echo as I enter the tunnel, clanging reverb on the flat road to nowhere, heading inland from any safe harbor. This one starts in Iceland, where Angela is. And it ends in a psych ward. Breaking and entering. In Iceland, with my sister in a cave, both tricked into sleep by foreign ghosts, the details vague. We escape or retreat when our mother comes, keys jangling to guard against the fear. It's odd of her to cross the ocean without being asked. She settles in and hints she needs some help to score a script. This should have been a sign I scribbled on the page while waiting in the Toronto Western Psych emerge above the noted score of Biles's Gold Floor Routine 15.966, and the words I caught and saved from air that night. This city is full of pimps, johns, and dealers, and all the bad people. Fuck this. Fuck you. I shouldn't have worn mascara, although it's possible this last line came from me. I carry words from then to now to stop from slipping underground into that empty, dark, motherless cave. Load of good that did. I have no notes from her triage interview, which they performed behind a metal door. They must have written voices urging harm, since self-harm is coded as a crisis, while psychosis can be treated at home by family. I can't imagine how this feels, no doctor ever said to me. I drove home alone, and that night I dreamed of an anxious girl who speaks pain aloud, each trauma she has ever had save one. I take my notes and read to her from my prescription pad. It doesn't soothe, not yet. She says, I want my fucking phone. We want to hear the music of the keys, although we know better this empty, soundless want. No mother, no one come to take us home. This one is not as haunted by my parents, but it comes from a dream that I had when Angela Rawlingson and I were house sitting a palais in France, and in beautiful southern France, and eating beautiful food all night and sneaking down to the kitchen to eat cookies at midnight. Whose cookies are we talking about? She's caught with her hand in the cookie jar, sweet smear on midnight lip. A friend's hand hovers on the light switch. One of them feels bad. One crumbles silence and whispers the truth. These cookies are neither low carb nor gluten-free. Whether or not she is actually my friend or the man crouched in the bad feeling is my father may never resolve into truth. What can you do with cookie crumbs that lead where? The tenant's basement bedroom, a bathtub, A friend shares her story, and across my face, a shadow of bad feelings unfurl its blindfold planet when a hand brushes truth. What would happen if I ate all the cookies I wanted? Really? My friend, would you like one too? My therapist asks, what does feel bad feel like? I describe a sensation that is lodged somewhere near the truth, stuck in my throat, like a cookie eaten in secret. Here in the kitchen, I have no friends. I am held by a bad feeling that starts in the dream and is choking on a half woken truth. And I'm just going to end with a poem about talking to ghosts. He said, she said. Thank you for your attention. I swallowed this sweet thing in a dream. I woke up heavy. I said aloud, "What's the matter with you, Dad?" As if language were a refuge. You taught me to run to from only moving one frantic eye. Something stitched, so back to the argument. Stop seeing what's the matter with me. Ghosts are better than reanimated fathers, and it is more acceptable to steal from the ether. When you said we take matters into our own hands, I stopped starting the day with a ritual. No more ecstasy pulled from a fluted throat. Return to the bland daily mouthlessness. I said, here are all the wrongs I was told to address to you. Then the driftwood settled on your ashes. Well, you said, as if there were presence enough in me to notice the aha finger snap announce its failure. I guess I'm less angry now that you don't exist, where I am left to a singular silence, whistling nothing like wind through fistulae, as though I were here without you, with only the sound of these walls. Thank you. The end. Mute.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sachiko. Our next reader is Angela Rawlings. A. Rawlings is a Canadian Icelandic interdisciplinary artist whose books include Wide Slumber for Lepidopterus, Gibber, Own, C2, and Sound of Mall. Her book Wide Slumber was adapted to music theater by Valher Sigurðsson. I'm getting there are a lot of different languages in the bios tonight, so I'm going to do my best. My Spanish, my French, my German, my Icelandic. We'll see. By Valher Sigurðsson and Vavavoom. Her libretti include Bodiless and Longitude. Rawlings' A Fall/Trauma was shortlisted for the Leslie Scalapino Award for Innovative Women Playwrights. She is one half of the performance duo Volva with Maya Yantar and one half of the new music duo Moss, Not Moss with Rebecca Brutton. Rawlings is the recipient of a Chalmers Arts Fellowship and held the position of Queensland Poet in Residence. She holds a PhD in Theatre and Performance Studies from the University of Glasgow. Rawlings lives in Iceland. Please welcome Angela Rawlings.
Oh, thank you so much, Ben. It's such a pleasure to be here online with Lit Live. Gary, oh my goodness, all the kisses and hugs in the world for curating this gorgeous event. I'm just absolutely thrilled to be here with fellow wonder readers and with so many familiar faces and names. A special shout out to Moonliners. Hi, Sonia and Sean, who's in the UK and joining me at the ungodly hour of almost 1 a.m. to be with you all here online. Before I read, I thought that I would say two things. One is I'm going to walk around for the rest of this year contemplating a poet who reads into a deity. I couldn't help but see this, Sachi, on the side of your microphone. It says deity. So I'm like, what does that mean? And then the other thing was, Sachi, you mentioned breathing, out breath, etc. so much in your poems. And it made me think, when we are in these virtual spaces together, we're very much missing the benefits of being with our bodies in, real space readings. So I thought I would invite the totally nerdy optional thing for everybody to do 3 deep breaths with me. On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. A nice big inhale. And out. In through the nose. Out through the mouth. Yes, Sachi, yawn if you've got it. One more in. And out. Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Okay. So I'm going to share with you just one poem. It's called Anthropocento, and that's a neologism of my deviation or my devising, coming from the word cento as well as Anthropocene. A cento is a type of text that is compiled from other people's texts. Anthropocene is a fairly new word proposed by geologists as the possible epoch in which we currently are. We've been in the Holocene, and we still are in the Holocene, but the suggestion is that we may have started into the Anthropocene, an epoch that is driven by humans acting as a geologic force. So this poem is called Anthropocento, and I wrote it while I was the official poet recordist of the Earthbound Symposium in Aarhus, Denmark in 2018. And the lines that are in here, well, it's cento. It's all stuff that I overheard over a few different days during the gathering. And there are multiple languages within here, which is also represented from the people who are present, primarily English, but hopefully you'll catch a bit of Greenlandic, Sami, Swedish, Danish, Icelandic, Polish, and German. And I apologize in advance for my less than stellar pronunciations of languages other than English. Streams of matter, energy, information. Streams of consciousness. Streams of rain. Streams of reindeer. Streams of Ealu. Streams of sound. Streams of snails. Streams of pests. Streams of pasts. Streams of time not going, but coming. Streams of food production. Streams of yoik. Streams of Kemenova. Streams of Yara. Streams of state oil. Streams of streams. Streams of streams. Streams of streams, of streams, of streams, streams of birds. Streams of below the earth, the ground. Streams of subway systems, tree roots. Streams of anthropologists. Streams of change agency. Streams of below the earth rumble. Streams below the ground, the ground. Streams below the birds, the ground. Streams below the ground, the birds' bones. Streams of the birds below. Streams below the ground, the bellow. Streams below the ground, the bellow. Streams bellow to hear the soil speak. Streams hear the soil speak with soil in the mouth, with soil in the mouth of soil. Streams of tension, streams through generations, omloop of power, bakar of electricity, aur of omloop, arne of Kamanova, streams of DDT, strömmungen of veins, praunde of pasts, omloop of oil, bakar of color, bakar of soil, aur of hay, strömmungen of trouble, arsne of tilhörur, omloop of thinking with, praunde of land, aur of sound, arsne of lid, omloop of lis, bakar of vand, arsne of vat, arsne of future, låtit, fuglar, fuglar, timmisat, fugle, fåglar, arsne of ears, aur of erar, arsne of ö, omloop of ö, ar of microbes, linturia, praunde of infrasound, strömmungen of living with the ruinous, bakar of the contaminated, omloop of response, streams embodied, temps, tempo, arsne of geologists tapping clint with hammers, bakar of horses, strömmungen of houses, bakar of pond leeches, bakar of Fallopian japonica, arsne of cut slugs before sleep, bakar of not birds but weeds. To make, manifest, to make, manifesto. Why make, manifesto? To make, risky attachments. Praunde of movement, praunde of öst, aur of plovers, ibis, ducks, moorhens. Streams of glaciers, strömmungen of lovers, bakar of red thread, bakar of possibility, praunde of meetings, strömmungen of cracks, aur of muscles as witnesses, arsne of rör, arsne of roar, streams of soundscapes, arsne of landscapes, soundscapes of streams, streams of mycelial networks, streams of veins, aur of kind, streams of sheep, praunde of sourdough bacteria, streams of antinatalists, strömmungen of perspectives, streams of perspective, arsne of hybridity, omloop of fungi, bakar of migratory whales, omloop of local honey, arsne of ants, praunde of berries, streams of facilitated encounters, bakar of cannibalism, streams of foreshores of streams, arsne of wild honeybees who died out in Denmark in the 1980s, bakar of marimo, arsne of himlen, aur of solitary bees. Streams of cows, streams of spiderwebs, streams of sneklehoes, streams of stressed snails laying eggs, streams of cherche pour le temps perdu, streams of organized squares filled with speculative seashores, streams of deep A, streams of decomposition, streams of blubber, streams of flesh, streams of interspecies performance, streams urgent and unlikely, streams of experimental field methods, streams of not prescriptive, streams of not directive, streams of invasive species, streams of public policy, streams of impotential, streams of confrontation, streams of octavation 19 times, streams of 426 hertz, streams outside the industrial complex, streams of cancer cells, streams of solitary cells, streams of organelles, streams of antisociality, streams of prefer not to. Miigwech, tak fyrir, merci beaucoup, thank you.
Amazing.
Wow.
Thank you, Angela. We are going to have one more reader before we take a brief intermission, and that reader is going to be Deborah Ostrovsky. Deborah is a writer, editor, and translator living in Montreal. Her writing has appeared in Maisonneuve, McSweeney's, Carte Blanche, Tablet, Geist, and other literary journals and magazines in Canada, the US, and France. Tonight, she presents a book written by Audrey Hébert entitled Hochelaga Girls, first published in 2018 by Les Éditions de la Crue in Montreal. Deborah Ostrovsky is the translator of Hochelaga Girls, and she will be our reader tonight. Thank you. Deborah.
Thank you very much, both Ben and Gary. I am reading from this book here. It's not completely published in full translation in English yet, but this is the French version from Les Éditions de la Crue. And I should thank them this evening because they've been very generous with their time and also very open to me translating. In fact, they gave me, or I should say via Audrey Hébert, the poet, they've given me carte blanche to translate and publish her translations as far and as wide as I would like. So I have translated a few in a few local journals, including Carte Blanche and Montreal Writes. I'm hoping to translate more and, to be honest, testing out a few poems tonight. I can't remember, Ben, if you actually gave a little bio of Audrey Hébert, but I'd just like to say a few words about her. This is her first book of poetry called Hochelaga Girls, published in 2018. It's been very popular recently. And she was born, Hébert was born in what is known in Montreal as the Hochelag or the Hochelaga Maisonneuve region. Some of you are probably familiar with it. It's also called Oma. And in 2015, Hébert finished her MA in art history on the needlework of the French artist Louise Bourgeois, and she's currently completing a doctorate. And upon doing genealogical research, she discovered she's distantly related to the writer Anne Hébert, and that name comes up in her poems as well. And just a little word about Hochelaga Maisonneuve, because I'm not sure how many people are here from Montreal, but it's an area of the city that's quite interesting. It's undergoing a lot of gentrification, and it's an area that has experienced huge adversity and incredible poverty. And it's an area also that recently, in certain studies done by public health, the life expectancy there is 10 years shorter than in an area like myself, which is just a little bit further west. So she writes about a lot of this experience of growing up in Hochelaga as a girl, and Hochelaga features a lot in her poems. So I'm going to read as much as I can because you won't be able to find her poems in English, the collection, for a while, but they're short poems. So I'm starting with a poem called In My Poetry by Audrey Hébert. In my poetry, no interest in light except strobe lights. No goose splitting the sky open in mid-flight. Only that fucking shitty bird that bit me on a school trip in 1998 Sweatshirt says, I survived a bird attack. No emotion in front of stones. Désolé to Yves Bonnefoy, just the desire to pitch rocks at windows. No mythological figure, just Aphrodite having a beer with Artemis while checking out Apollo, and sometimes Persephone. In my poetry, no outpouring before the serene waves, just an ooh face to the filthy water of the St. Lawrence Anyways River. No nostalgia in front of the house where I was born. I passed by recently and it's become a crack house. No astonishment before the clouds. Oh, these wandering nomads, fucking toxic emanations from factories. My poetry, an uppercut to the nose. The next poem is called My T-shirt, My Skin. In a Hochelaga thrift shop, somewhere between a T-shirt for the Optimist Club of Repentigny and one of Labatt's Blue, I found my old jersey, the school symbol still intact. My mother had given it away in a bag of old clothes. And upon inspection, I recognized traces of bullying, ketchup stains on the lower back, drips of soy sauce on the back of the sleeves, cigarette burns from some dude who wanted to transform me into Joan of Arc. Yes, it's definitely him. Eyes wide shut, I start to thinking about all I've done. A pluses despite the partying, BA in art history, MA with honorific mention. For $2, I buy my own shirt back. I return to my apartment, hang it from my ceiling when I enter, like a hockey sweater from the Bell Center. Now this is a poem called Nelly, and it's about Nelly Arcan, who was a very popular, in fact, a literary sensation in Quebec, and I think, definitely in France. So I'm not sure about the rest of Canada. She died 11 years ago. I think it's 11 years ago in September of 2009. And her last year was the 10th anniversary of her death. And she's still someone who is very missed. She died very young. She took her own life at 35 or 36. She wrote a lot about the sexual objectification of women, but also suffered from the feelings of those objectification very much. And she, like I said, unfortunately took her own life. And it seems that she's still very much in the literary consciousness here and still talked about. Her first book was called Putain. It was a bestseller in France and in Quebec. And putain, as you probably know, translates as whore. So this is an ode to Nelly. Nelly, reading whore at 14, baseball bat blow to the uterus. First time running away at 15, I bumped into Nelly in front of Billy Coon Bar. I wanted to thank her, to touch her, to kiss her, worship her, make love to her, Nelly the sublime. Always doused in an inch thick of makeup to camouflage her funeral mask. Poor, inconsolable, soul-stripped Nelly. After Nelly's death, I wanted to go to the hardware store and buy 3 meters of rope. My friend Noemi took care of me. Every girl who is my true next of kin has the date 24/09/09 written somewhere on her skin. Girls to canonize, pronto. Number 1, Zelda Fitzgerald, this is fucking urgent. Number 2, Jeanne Duval. Number 3, Huguette Golin. Number 4, Belle, even if she's a partisan of platonic bestiality. Number 5, Lindsay Lohan. Number 6, the goddess of fireflies. Number 7, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. Go read Americana. Number 8, Little Kim. Number 9, Virginia Woolf. Number 10, Machine Gun Molly. Number 11, The Princess and Mario Brothers. Number 12, Anne Dorval. Met her once, so cool. 13, Barbara Kruger. 14, Muriel Guilbeault. Number 15, Jeanne Schneider. I know, go Google her. Number 16, Marina Tsvetaeva. Number 17, Calamity Jane Campion. Number 18, Anne Hébert, distant relative. Number 19, Kim Gordon. Number 20, Françoise David. Oops, already done. Thanks, Frankie the boy. And this is a poem that's kind of an ode, sardonic ode to Anne Hébert, called Kamouraska Revisited. Probably some of you or all of you are familiar with the novel by Anne Hébert called Kamouraska. So this is a kind of poem, satirical poem about Kamouraska. The fuck am I doing in Kamouraska? Not here to find the phantom of my celebrated great aunt. I lost a bet with Chloe. Gambling is hazardous. This poem sponsored by Lotto Quebec. In a nasty bar, I throw back bowling pins and shots of local vodka. Washroom as dirty as the one in Train Spotting. Sudden urge to plunge into the toilet bowl and reemerge in the river back in Montreal. I take my exit into the parking lot. Hunched over like an animal, I urinate behind a car. A bunch of truckers get their eye-filled band of Europhiles. Back inside, I order another beer. The ambience is OSFB, oh so frigging boring. GHB pretzels, a sleeping pill, something to change one's mind. I take notes on my cell phone, gazillionth plan for my doctorate de merde. Collect feces specimens, dissect them, classify them. Some trash pitches his number at me on a receipt for condoms from Jean Coutu. The fuck. 10 minutes later, another dude does the same thing. The fucking fuck du fuck. Surely this is a local tradition. I should have read The Habits and Fucked Up Customs of Kamouraska by Roland Barthes, or How to Survive an Evening in a Bar on the Lower St. Lawrence River by Guy Debord. Time to get out of here before I end up a cashier in the local pharmacy. Chloe, I'm not talking to you for at least another month. This is called Spring Cleaning. For sale on Kijiji, one full bag of torn stockings. Fetishists, please refrain from responding. A collection of handouts from a data and surrealism course. Super Nintendo with 10 or so games, one of which is fucking Zelda. For sale, baby shoes never worn. My collection of cuttings, self-mutilation at 14 and not ashamed. A magic wand that doesn't work, Harry Potter phase. A half-empty flask of Wellbutrin, worst shit ever. À vendre, 2,315 selfies. I know, I need the attention. The complete works of Léoto, received as a gift, not crazy about it. A stuffed Care Bear, $300. I'm attached to it, but need the cash. La Chasse Spirituelle by Rimbaud, an authentic fake. And a signed copy of this book, just for you. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Deborah.
Thank you.
We are going to take a short break, about 10-15 minutes. So if you need to run away, use the washroom, not be on video for 15 minutes, fill up your drink, now's the time. And during that time, we are going to have some music from Troy Witherow. Troy Witherow is also known as the leader of the Hamilton-based band Illitree. Illitree recently released their debut album, Delinean Horses, via Hamilton record label Other Songs Music Co. About that album, Troy says, radical self-absorption, irresistible melancholy, making a mobile of my own letdowns. I present to you Delinean Horses as an echo of an echo in a 39-minute frame. I think of this album as a collage of indistinct watercolor impressions. These are not abstractions for the sake of being abstract. These are the feelings that I wanted to express, expressions of faith and the cyclone of confusion that finds me again and again, fogs that never cleared. I did not have direct words for anything on this album. If I did, I would have spoken them and moved on. Please welcome Troy Witherow. I think you might have to unmute here, Troy. There you
Can
go.
you hear me now?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Ben. I'm just gonna start. In old light, there's a child I saved. I'm dressed in fire to chase the ghosts away. Then slid down the wrong side of the rolling wall, and don't look back for me as I ripple through your mind. In old light, there's a child I saved. I dressed in fire to chase the ghost away. Then slid down the wrong side of the rolling wall, and don't look back for me as I ripple through your mind. If you're traveling in North Country Fair, where the wind hits heavy on the borderline, remember me to one who lives there, for she once was a true love of mine. If you go when snowflakes storm, when the rivers freeze and summer ends, please see she has a coat so warm to keep her from the howling wind. Please see for me if her hands hanging on. If it rolls and falls all down a breath. Please see for me if her hair's hanging long. For that's the way I remember her best. Well, I'm wondering if she remembers me at all. Oh, many times I often pray in the darkness of my night. Or in the brightness of my day. So if you're traveling in the North Country Fair, where the wind is heavy on twilight, remember me to one who lived there. She once was a true love of mine. Thank you. That was actually that's a Bob Dylan cover. This song's on my album. It's called Polish Rose. Pulling the blinds down, blocking the sun out. Thoughts in my mind swell. Childhood church bells. I couldn't light the candles. I couldn't play the hymn. We could be on our own. We could be in the wind. We can have it all. We can have it all. First we have to crumble. First we have to crawl. We can have it all. Just as the moon sings, just as the spring flows in, just as your eyes shine, I feel these oceans. This is our silent moment. These are our kissing tongues. We can walk through fields together, baby, we can run. We can have it all. We can have it all. It's pale on the surface, it's just beyond the wall. We can have it all. Ooh, we can have it all. Ooh, we it all. First you have to stumble, first you have to fall. We can have it all. We can have it all. We can have it all. First we have to crumble, first we have to crawl. We can have it all. And this is my last song. Thank you for listening, and thanks so much, Ben, for having me.
I find it hard to breathe. I'm overcome with every shade of winter. Maybe I'm a card in your hand. It's not for me to know. I've come undone. You're moving in slow motion. I'm thinking I went over the top. Why did no one ask me to stop? There's a place I needed to go. It's fucked in sludge and the roads are closed. You will love me. You will love me when I'm gone. You will love me. You will love me when I'm gone. You will love me. You will love me when I'm gone.
Thank you very much. Hopefully,
Wonderful. Thank you, Troy. Beautiful.
you're welcome. Thanks so much.
Welcome back, everyone. I think everyone's found their way back from the kitchen or the bathroom or wherever you made off to. We're just going to get right back into it with the readings. Our next reader is Derek Beaulieu. Derek Beaulieu is the author/editor of over 20 collections of poetry, prose, and criticism, including 2 volumes of his selected work, Please No More Poetry in 2013 and Conceptuel Arbitin in 2017. His most recent volume of fiction, A Novel, was published by Jean Bois Editions in Paris. Beaulieu has exhibited his visual work across Canada, the United States, and Europe, and has won multiple local and national awards for his teaching and dedication to students. Derek Beaulieu holds a PhD in creative writing from Roehampton University and is the director of the literary arts at Banff Center for Arts and Creativity. He can be found online at derekbeaulieu.wordpress.com. Please welcome Derek Beaulieu.
Thank you so much, Ben. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm reading from the side of Sleeping Buffalo Mountain, what was formerly known as Tunnel Mountain here in Banff. It's a dark, dark, snowy evening here on Treaty 7 territory. I'm going to read from a text I rarely read from, but in thanks to one of the folks on the bill, I'm going to read from my chapbook Ex Despicium. Here it is, kind of, which was published by Stuart Ross's fantastic Proper Tales Press. Ex Despicium is a word that I stole from the Kelowna-based poet, or the BC-based poet, Kevin McPherson Eckhoff. Ex Despicium is the practice of telling the future based on an animal's entrails. She was pregnant when she was 4 months pregnant, pregnant when she was 3 months pregnant, pregnant when she was 7 months pregnant, not pregnant at all when she was 7 months pregnant, but what did she know? Out and out, then out and in, she and him. I was born in the Montreal Jewish Hospital and later at the Montreal General Hospital. I am neither Jewish nor a general. I remember it this way, generally. I was born partially at the Montreal Jewish Hospital, the remainder was later. A purple used since antiquity as the mark of wealth and lavish opulence. I remember something happening, did it? Did something happen? I remember it. I remember it. Did it happen? Something happens. I remember it. It happened, and she remembers. He remembers. She remembers. She remembers. So does she. I was born in Montreal. I was born in Montreal or Montreal. I was born in Montreal or Montreal or Brossard or Longueuil. When I was born in Brossard, but then I was born in Longueuil, but now I was born in Brossard again, but I wasn't born there. I was born in Montreal or Montreal, but we lived in Brossard. I was born in Montreal or Montreal, but once I lived, I was born in Brossard. Brossard was itself, and then it was in Longueuil, and then it was itself again, but the whole time it was part of Montreal or Montreal. I was born in Montreal. Brossard has no cemetery. I was born at the Montreal Jewish General Hospital and later at the Montreal Children's Hospital, which was appropriate as I was a child. They remember it this way. Once out, taken further out, down the street, they took me. They came in early, but it was time, and then they took me. I was a child, though I am not currently a child. That depends. One can be a child and grow and still be a child. Grow additionally and continue to be a child. Even when one is no longer a child, one is still someone's child, just as that someone is another's. Being a child and being a child is different. I was a child when I was taken down the street. I was taken down the street by someone. I was with them, and they were with a child, though not with child. A purple obtained drop by drop, squeezed from mollusks found along eastern Mediterranean shores. Spurred on by intestine, they had to wait for him to decide what to leave in and what to remove, having already decided to remove me. Men don't have friends. Men work. If Montreal, then Calgary. A 1-year contract or a 2-year contract, a deal. Then Montreal, then Calgary. A deal is a deal. He was born here, murmuring on the way. He was born here 3 or 4 years later and 2 months later. I was brought to yellow up the stairs. It was yellow and it was on the right. A moment, yellow. The sun shone a spot on the wall, right blue. 3 stockings on the banister. The photograph, the room was on the left and blue. The photograph insists the spot on the wall. Green Lane, Green Fields, Greenfield Park, South Shore, West Island. He was silver, and either he was at one side incessantly, or one never saw him and depended on him. Half a year later, in a box, half a year, under a bed, she's chasing marbles. He chased a silk ball, and so does she. I looked out the doors. I am nothing new. He will be anxious to leave. He was on the East End and the South Shore 6 of 7. In and out of the hospital, 7 kids in 6 years. Wash day on Sunday. That corner of St. Catherine's Air Liquide is there across from Philip Square, and on that corner is Burke's with the ring counter and the door to the left, immediately on the left, right there. Across from the bus stop, him. You have to ask them. They owe you. Don't leave until you ask them, she said. She told him. With a wooden leg and a glass eye, she was a fine-looking woman. She. A night running from the police, hiding with his brother who didn't hide at all, gave up and went home. She knew all about it. A scrap of rope with 3 wooden beads, red, blue, yellow. An afternoon at St. Ellen's Island, not yet Ile St. Hélène man in his world. He served on the Quebec, but it never left the port, not particularly active service. He served on the Quebec, which was the Uganda. It was only the Quebec after it voted not to participate. It was the only ship. Did he vote? She is afraid of stepping beyond the first rung of a stepladder. She hesitated to step on the ground from the running board of an automobile. She is afraid to catch even a soft ball. She shied from turning on the gas jet, from putting things on shelves. For example, she wrote that he is afraid of cows, horses, and pigs. He is described as showing fear in response to the loud noise of a truck. She whimpered, cried, clung to her parents, and glanced apprehensively around the bedroom. She could only say that she is afraid of lions. I'm afraid to stop. It's not surprising we live down the street from each other, but she caught her eye first crossing the tracks. She thinks about it. Coffee led to a walk, led to wine, led to something else. She is appearing for no reason. She is not cause for concern. She is inevitable. She came to Calgary, but they didn't have a deal. It was just where the work was. Lived down the street, but I didn't know that at the time. How could I? I was just a kid. She's with me and I'm with her. I don't want to believe that because they were afraid. He was struggling to breathe. More and more, he couldn't breathe. Increasingly, he couldn't breathe. He was in Fort McMurray. He was in Montreal. He was in Houston. Sit down on the train, Thomas. He was in Qatar. He was in India. He was in Kuwait. He was in Hong Kong. Most of the time, he wasn't here. One of the dogs in the street starts barking. He just nodded without looking around. He was only 7. He was 12. He was 3. He was only 17. If I cause you that much offense, why don't you just ignore me completely, pretend that I don't exist, he said. He chased him across the yard and through the swing set. The barb caught his wrist and wrote a line, another mark. He was in Qatar when he pushed him down the stairs, thinking that he was just like them. The last thing he wanted to think, she just stepped over him. Either she didn't notice or she didn't want to. Maybe it was my fault. This is the one sentiment that makes me happy. Hit me. Do something. Do anything. Please be nice to me. There was something pinched about her, a look of suffering, of apprehension, and in addition, she was extremely small. She was crying. I had disturbed him, and he was annoyed. On other nights, he was afraid of other places. Expect an egg. A wedge in a doorway is worth keeping, like this. Inhale a house without plumbing. A smoke alarm, a rocking chair, 2 magnets being followed by a voice. An open mouth insists a person skip rope. Sand. We were 2. I was 1. They tried things. They tried this. They tried this again. They tried something else. They tried something else again. They went away. They came back. They took her away, both of them. They tried something else, but it was too early. They tried again. She was ready. She and I were there. It was just her and I there. She had her, and they gave her to me. She was there with me, and she was just there. There we were. A man who pays attention to emotion isn't a real man. He loved horses. We were just kidding around, and she hit her teeth on the couch. One flipped up like a dog-eared page. I don't know what to do, but improvised and said he'd do the same thing if he had to. Funny, because it had happened to him twice, weeks apart as well. He's not a cause for concern. They lived across the street and were as close as family, though I was nothing but intimidated except by their son. The other one lived in a caboose and doesn't talk to them anymore. There's a lot of that. Gouin and Martin named the street after themselves. A barrel of urine broke his back. She walks in with a ring from that corner that from that Burke's while he's shielded behind a newspaper. What do you think? She said. Not much, he said. He hoped his teeth would last as long as he did. They didn't. You're just dealing with your own little obsessions. Hanging herself with the dog's leash in the bedroom, an overdose of copraximol, a painkiller her mother used for a knee problem, taking 40 of her mother's painkillers in the early hours of Saturday. She had hanged herself with a belt, hanged herself in the stairwell leading to the second floor of the family apartment. She was given 2 choices. He was with the Navy, a merchant marine. He was an oiler on a passenger ship, a ferry. He was with the Navy or with the merchant marine. He wouldn't talk about it. He wouldn't not talk about it. He just wouldn't say anything. Best not to ask. He died saving another man's life, pulling him out of the water. He was sure. There's a book about it that says he died at sea, an oiler working on an engine. He said that he did, and he didn't. He said nothing. He said something else. He was caught on deck and washed overboard. He remembers it, a burial at sea. He was right about that. There's a book. She was given two choices, and she picked one. She chose one of two possibilities. She had her one choice, and she chose. Either everything she needed every month until he was 18, or just enough all at once. I'm afraid I have no idea what he wanted. She was lucky enough to go with her, but they were left behind. It wasn't until later that he found out and went back and got them, but how many years was that? Years ago, when visiting Crete, I stopped at the small museum at Chania, at the western end of the island, and noticed a jar which has a crust of bright purple around the mouth. A small bit had fallen off, and I picked it up and put it in my wallet. Years later, I've held this up against a sample of Mexican basketware, and the color was an exact match. She was a terrible cook. Tuesday is a French film. She. He was angry. She was angry. She had to be centered. This diffraction of light into its spectral components make the blue jay's feathers so bright and unmistakable. The minute grid size of each feather captures one portion of the light source. She couldn't remember how long, but he sang to her, sang and talked about when they met, the swimming in the dock and the living in Verdun. She asked for her mother. They said prayers together, and she and him each night talked to her or talked to her photograph. That stopped. Good night, lassie, he said. That stopped. He didn't do any of those things to us. He listened, he doted, he sent mail, but he never used my name. Schnook, son, walked down Sherbrooke. They all knew him by name. Good afternoon, master, mister. She flew by herself for the first time, 45 minutes alone. She couldn't find 3 or 10, but the guard could. Can do. Men don't have feelings. Colds are afraid of me. I simply don't let death into my life. That dog don't hunt. There are things that just happen. There's no right or wrong about them. How hard could it be? It's just the way that it is. No reason to get upset about it. I think I've hurt myself. Does it look serious to you? Measure twice, cut once. Why do you have to do everything the hard way? Do one thing well, then move on. Purple blood was still unclear until I saw a cut artery spurting through bright, incandescent aerated blood in a film record of heart surgery. Arterial blood has that bright shining quality too, and so the circle of the bright purple associations was finally closed to my satisfaction. Why can't you take our word for it? Why make the same mistakes over and over again? Her and him and him and him and her and him and him and him and her and him and him. Her and him and him and her and her. Her and him and her and her and him and him. Her and him and her and him and him. Her and him and him and I. Her and him and her and him. Her and I and her and her. She and I and her. You people. Not much. Thank you very much.
Amazing. Thank you, Derek. Our next reader is going to be Stuart Ross. Stuart Ross is a writer, editor, writing teacher, publisher, and small press activist. He is the winner of the 2019 Harbourfront Festival Prize for his contributions to Canadian literature, as well as the Relit Prize for short fiction, the Canadian Jewish Literary Award for poetry, and more. His 20 books of fiction, poetry, and essays include 70 Kippers with Michael Dennis, Motel of the Opposable Thumbs, A Sparrow Came Down Resplendent, Snowball, Dragonfly, Jew, and Buying Cigarettes for the Dog, one of my personal favorite titles. Sos en sola persona, a selection of his poems translated into Spanish, will be published by Socios Fundadores this fall in Buenos Aires. His work has also been translated into French, Norsk, Slovene, Russian, and Estonian. Last year, his micropress, Proper Tales, which published what Derek was just reading from, celebrated its 40th anniversary. Stuart lives in Cobourg, Ontario. Please welcome Stuart Ross.
Thank you very much, Ben. And thank you to the whole Lit Live junta. This is like a dream lineup that I'm part of tonight. It's quite exciting. And my mic's on and everything, right? We're good? Okay. I'm going to start off, when I launched my first book was 1996 with ECW Press, and the other book that ECW was launching that day was a selection of Dazzling Scarves by R.M. Vaughan. And Richard had this idea that we would each read each other's poems to start off with. So I thought for Richard, I would read the very first tiny poem in his book, his first book of first full poetry collection, a selection of Dazzling Scarves. Underneath history lies contempt. You should know that. You were in my memoirs, a foot soldier in my roman à clef, a footnote numbering in the thousands. Peace to Richard. A nickel's worth for beep. Noon, 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 moon, moon, loon, yam, yawn, comb, comb, come, cumulus, mule, louse. Dune, dune, doom, dawn, down, dam, 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 loop, leap, leap, lipstick, lip, stuck, stick, sick, knock, knock, nick, tectonic, tick, 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 trick, L, slick, slick, slack, tongue, tongue. Noon do knock, noon do knock, noon do nick, noon dawn tectonic, noon down tick, moon damn tick, moon damn tick, loon damn trick, yam loop L, yawn leap trick, comb leap L, comb lipstick slick, cum lip slick, cumulus stuck slack, mule sticks tong, louse sick tongue. And I thought I would now read a novel, a recent novel that I wrote, and it's got questions afterwards for classroom and book club. I've never had a book club look at one of my novels, but this one's all prepared. So the novel, I'll read in its entirety, and then I'll dive into the questions. And you can just answer them in your own head. Hanover, 1959. The rain fell hard, but only briefly. It had its usual effect. The streetcar rattled to its final halt. None were found within. 1. Did you feel you could relate to any of the characters in this novel? Who did you most closely identify with? Have you ever experienced anything similar in your lifetime? 2. Why did the author feel it was necessary to set the story in 1959? 3. Who built the streetcar? Are the Serbs to blame? 4. Does this remind you of any other novels you have read? 5. Who do you imagine playing the role of the rain if a film version were to be made of Hanover 1959? 6. Do you feel trigger warnings should have been included at the front of this novel? 7. Virginia Woolf once wrote, "His wife was crying and he felt nothing. Only each time she sobbed in this profound, this silent, this hopeless way, he descended another step into the pit." Compare the use of the semicolon in this passage with the semicolon in the novel. 8. Why was the halt final? 9. Do you feel motivated to read more novels by this author? 10. Everyone has their own favorite passage from Hanover 1959. What is yours? I had a little bit more fiction there tonight. I'm going to read from, as mentioned in the introduction, this is the newest book. It's called 70 Kippers, the Dagmar Poems. It's collaborative poems I wrote with Michael Dennis, a very, very fine Ottawa poet and a very dear friend of mine. We got together on 6 occasions over 2 years, and each time we wrote 20 poems all at once, all simultaneously. And so the 120 poems, and there are 70 kippers. And I'll just read a few of those. And I see that Angela has answered all of my questions from my novel. I can't wait to read those afterwards. Okay. We picked up all the pennies, then started in on the nickels. The sky stomped on our hands and metal futures cried in our ears. My mother once told me never repeat a word I say. I told my boys, never repeat a word I tell you that my mom told me. Funny that dimes were smaller than nickels. Pennies were just pennies. Our pockets bulged with all the quarters we stole. This was 1982. Nothing was bigger than quarters. Bobby the squirrel said so. A cloud resembling Yo-Yo Ma got its trousers from Mayakovsky. It craved an audience, but the Politburo said niet to stifled boos. I eat my good armchair, it howled, choking on fabric, spitting out nails. A river resembling the cloud flowed through the veins of his Uncle Tom's cabin, nestled beneath a cliff. Not the cliff of despair, but the other one, the happy cliff. Soon the Samizdat told us the news. Free balloons were coming to free the balloons that were trapped. We were all very happy about that. Our country was shaped like a tutu. I guess these are sort of anti-poems, aren't they? What does that mean, anti-poems? I think they're anti-poems. Let's call them that, or uncle poems. A smallmouth bass looked at me. I could swear he mouthed the word help. My wife said fish don't talk, but she'd been wrong before. I turned my back on her, threw the fish a rope. That's when we toppled into the green water. Things were different between us here. I realized the fish had been an ally, feigning distress to repair a marriage. Surprising what fish know about humans, who they call Gill Sands. Just like the former Leafs defenseman, Todd Gill, who had 3 shoulders and used them all, the small mouth, the medium mouth, and the large mouth. Hooked, line and sinker. And let's read one more from 70 Kippers. That will leave you, I believe, 66 Kippers still to explore in the future if you choose to. 75 Kippers. The perfect bad breath breakfast for a giant entering the ring. His left arm tattooed love, the right hate. His broken nose said, here. He was a traffic light, all red, yellow, and green. I placed my fist in his skull. 6 kippers swam out of his left ear. I gave them names, kept them as pets. He still had 69 of them. I'm going to read a couple of recent poems of my own, solo poems. This one's called 6 Hours. In my dream, my dad went missing. His parking spot was empty. The police didn't take me seriously. I screamed at them over the phone. In my dream, Nelson Ball was a goat. We sat in his kitchen. He couldn't talk, but he nodded a lot and smiled. In my dream, my mother, dead, was on the phone, telling me where to find the cutlery. The drawer kept disappearing. In my dream, I was looking for a vegan restaurant in Pompano Beach. It was called Contingency Plan. A cool breeze blew in through the window. The night was busier than I'd expected. The shadows on the ceiling waited in the dark. And here's another one I've never actually read aloud before. It's called Diptych. More hockey references. It's interesting. I have no interest in any sports, but hockey creeps into things that I write sometimes. 1, Dave Keon. Dave Keon was called David when he was a child. His favorite number was 14. Isn't it something that he was number 14 for the Toronto Maple Leafs? He was a hockey player and a gentleman. He would open the door for you, Also, if he checked you and you fell to the ice, he would ask if you were okay. He won the Lady Byng Trophy for being a gentleman. He advertised soup. He moved to Florida. He is alive. 2, autobiography. I was born in a sandbox just after a rainfall. The sand was stuck all over my skin. My father used lighter fluid for everything. We lived in a neighborhood in Toronto and put money in UNICEF boxes. The lights went out. I have 2 emotions, guilty and sad. People enjoy my company. I do not prioritize posture. I drew pictures on the cardboards stiffening my father's shirt after they came back from the dry cleaners. Later, I turned 60. Once, I was 7. I'm gonna try and sneak in 1 or 2 very quick short stories here. Let's see what I can fit in here. This is called Electric Can Openers. We were lying on the grass in front of the old schoolhouse in the Pioneer Village. We were lying in vomit. We argued about whose vomit we were lying in. Phil said it was mine, and I said it was his. He was still wearing his jacket and tie. I was in a white shirt unbuttoned halfway down my chest. My pants were damp and stuck to my legs. All the other wedding guests were gone. We really wanted more alcohol, but all the buildings were locked. Plus, 2 security guards were standing above us, shining flashlights in our eyes. They were ladies. "Fuck off, lady," said Phil. The security guard with the closely cropped hair said, "You guys have got to leave. We have to lock this place up. The wedding is over. You are drunk." "Want us to call you a cab?" said the security guard who looked like Linda Carter from that old Wonder Woman TV series. "We can call you a cab, but you have to leave." I couldn't actually imagine standing up. The stars were spinning in the black molasses above our heads, and the moon was spitting bits of puke into our eyes. Griffin got married in this Pioneer Village, and Savita got married to him. Either Phil or me was in love with her, but I couldn't at this moment remember which of us it was. We danced to songs by Huey Lewis and the News, played by a band called Dewey Clueless and the Booze. They also played songs by the Police, the Knack, and the Cars, which we appreciated. There was no better music. I had fallen over and crawled across the dance floor and out the door. There were all these old buildings out here in the dark, a schoolhouse, a hotel, a newspaper office, some probably houses, and a church. I had always liked school, so I crawled to the schoolhouse. Phil was lying on the grass there, right near the door. Time passed. The music went silent. People's shoes crunched along the gravel roads. There was much vomit. It was vomit that I awoke in, and Phil too, with flashlights in our eyes. Linda Carter and the closely cropped lady reached down to grab our sleeves, but we both jerked our arms away. "We like it here," said Phil. "We want to stay here. It's good here." "That can't happen," said the closely cropped lady. "We want to go home. We've got lives, stuff to do, so you've got to go home." Linda Carter offered to call us a cab again. She sounded a little impatient. Her eyes sparkled like black gems. I decided I liked her more than I liked Savita. "We have vomit on us," I said. 150 years ago, people lived here. They walked around and went to the church and the newspaper office and the drugstore. They went about and did their things. They said hello to each other as they passed by each other. They got drunk on alcohol made from dandelions and shrubs and lay in their own vomit. Their wives came and dragged them home, or maybe put them on hay wagons and got them home like that, on wagons. Maybe the men were too big and heavy, and so the ladies had to call their big strapping sons to drag their fathers home. Or maybe their big strapping sons were lying in the vomit with them. It was a whole other era. No TV and no electric can openers. If you wanted to open a can of beans, you were fucked. If you wanted to watch a hockey game, you had to go to one in person at an actual rink. It might be 10 miles away, but you had to walk, and it was winter. I asked the cab driver if he could help me open a can of beans. I was clawing at it with my fingernails. When I get you home, he said, you're going to go in and get some paper towel and come back and clean your vomit off my seat. It's not my vomit, I said, it's Phil's. Oh, here's a little tiny poem here just popped up. I forgot it. I brought this one. It's called Poem. I see a light at the end of the tunnel, and beyond that, a tunnel. And I'm going to whip through one more page and a half story. And it's called A Particular Star. And again, I want to thank you all so much. I want to thank the people I'm reading with and the people who organized this and all of you who have shown up tonight. It's exciting in these weird, isolated times to be part of little rectangular communities. A particular star. I sat and peered out a particular sky in the black night. My breath fogged the window. The cold of the window flattened the tip of my nose. The windowsill was hard against my elbows. The spiny radiator was cold against my knees. I was in a chair of wood that my grandfather had made in his shop. My hands were folded as if in prayer beneath my chin. But I was a Jew, I didn't pray that way. If I were praying the way a Jew prays, my forehead would tap repeatedly against the breath-fogged window. Hebrew would flow from my lips like a wavering mumble, an emphatic plea. I blink and the star is still there. There are many facts to know about stars. I know none of them. Well, I know the sun is a star. It is expected to live for 10 billion years. But there are older stars, stars that will get older. But 10 billion years is a long time. The sun has such impressive longevity because it sleeps at night. My own longevity is more modest because I do not sleep at night. My life is barely the blink of a star. This is how stars see us humans. They give us life, sending life energy through the heavens and the sky and anointing us so that we can rise and totter to our feet or sink into our wheelchairs and choose to consume. Everything on this earth can be turned into something we can consume and then turn into garbage. It's remarkable. We can practically feel the garbage surround our feet and then creep up toward our ankles and caress our calves, our thighs, our knees. I shiver as the garbage engulfs my genitals. Semen oozes from the tip of my barely rigid penis. The stars know that when the garbage reaches my chest, it will coil around me and tighten, and then my breathing will stop. All that I have accomplished will be history. The stories I wrote will drift away in a breeze, skidding along the sidewalks and streets, perhaps into a park, where it will become snagged in bushes and cotton flower beds. Everything I experienced will be contained in the slowly fading mist of my breath on the cold window. Come summer, it will all have dissipated. I feel hands on my shoulders. They are warm and their grip is firm. A chin rests on the top of my head. Breasts press against my shoulder blades. A quiet voice fills the room. Bed? So I am not alone. I cannot see her, but I can hear her. Another human. The star fills my eyes. The hands knead my shoulders for a few moments, then slide forward until arms wrap around my chest. I am not alone. My grandparents have died, and my parents and my brothers, the mist of their breath evaporating from windows, yet I am not alone. I part my hands from under my chin and place them on the hands on my chest. Will you knock the garbage away? I want to ask when it reaches my abdomen. Will you do that for me? Will you knock the garbage away until I live 10 billion years? I will knock the garbage away for you. She and I, we both watch the star. We listen to our breaths. It becomes difficult to see the star through the fogged windows. If we don't stop breathing, the star will disappear. Our connection to its life energy will be severed. We need to stop breathing, or we will die. Thanks very much.
Wonderful. Thank you, Stuart. We have one more reader this evening. Our last reader is Rasikra Revolva. Rasikra Revolva is a queer femme writer, multimedia artist, editor, musician, performer, and SciComm advocate. She's an editor of the climate crisis anthology, Watch Your Head, A Call to Action, and one half of the experimental electronic duo, The Data Bats. She has published 2 chapbooks of glitch illustrated poetry, Cephalopography from Words on Pages Press in 2016, and If You Forget the Whipped Cream, You're No Good as a Woman from Gap Riot Press in 2018. Cephalopography 2.0 is her debut collection published by Woolsack and Wynne in August of this year, 2020. You can learn more about Rasika's writing at www.rasikarevolva.com. Please welcome Rasika Revolva.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks for sticking around. It's not been difficult to do, however, given the amazing caliber of these readings so far, which I'm about to join and hopefully live up to as well. I'm going to be reading only pieces from my new and first and only full-length collection so far, Cephalopography 2.0, which, as you now know, is available through Woolsack and Wynne. I will drop the link in the chat shortly. And I'm going to read 4 poems for you tonight. And that's no, a little more preamble, perhaps. The book itself, a quick shout out to Gary Barwin for blurbing. And it's very much concerned with human identities and experiences, a very wide gamut, but all experienced through the lens of cephalopods and their environment. Squids, octopuses, nautilus, cuttlefish. You'll find all of these here. And I really love them. So if you have questions about them, please ask me now or later or anytime. I love talking about cephalopods. It's the best. Breeding grounds, the stairway. Infernal, submerged in substrate, sedentary, sessile, subdued, suffocated, safe, whirled fingertips embedded, corrosive touch, coercive love, grit, particles, wholeness, ground, earth, floor, sand, frayed tissue seeped between grains, light sluiced under a closet door, click of dried saliva, dusty, nimble rasp. How many walls can line a pit? Is it more or fewer than 4? Shudder, seek a crevice to suck clean, suck dry, to spew frothing filament force field, wet muscle to knacker, to rock, interstitial, intertidal, caressed by the waves, abraded by the light, lighted by the waves, abraded by the caress, waved by the abrasion, caressed by the light. Ripening reek of mammalian secretions, piquant lick of brine, flushing, soaking, gelid tubes and chainsaw tongues exposure. Braising, glowing, beak, eye, sphincter, cilia, hook, exposure. The swirling roar of synthesis, milk and rainbow spitting fire from a silken core. Seizing light most ardently, resting free, resting free. The octopus complex. Flowering transmission, the wrapped heart hypothesis. I, what voodoo traces, am marine exhalations. I clone wanted reflections, inflections, departures, reperspirations, the soft look meridian. Focus your understanding. Love was the knife. How poetry, the floating science, here, I, the discovery to life. I have a small preamble for this next poem. Just a moment, let me set that. There we go. This next poem was written about a particular species of squid, which has only just been documented living in situ for the first time just a few days ago, actually. And it's called Spirula spirula, the ram's horn squid. There was a lovely New York Times article about it recently as well that was such a delight. And I chose to read this one tonight simply because of how absolutely thrilling it was to finally see this species in person. It has a very unusual locomotion, so expect some more poems. All right. Free the niqabi. Derided as weak, compliant, forlorn, I am spirula, ram's horn, spirula. Inhaled through my siphon, exhaled, transformed. Ageless oaths hiss along my phragmacone, thick with propulsive coloratura. Derided as weak, compliant, forlorn. Pining in, oh dear, sorry, I'm having a little bit of a tech issue. Just give me a moment. These squids so love to be memorable. All right, I'm going to resume that one, or rather restart it. All right, you're working fine now. Terrific. Free the niqabi. Derided as weak, compliant, forlorn, I am spirula, ram's horn, spirula. Inhaled through my siphon, exhaled, transformed. Ageless oaths hiss along my phragmacone, thick with propulsive coloratura. Derided as weak, compliant, forlorn. Pining in blindness since she was first born, withering beneath brutal undula. Inhaled through my siphon, exhaled, transformed. Both tentacles and all 8 arms forsworn, treaded like stock, shall never find true love. Derided as weak, compliant, forlorn. Jasminum sambac, so cruelly conformed. Cloaked in my viridian nebula, inhaled through my siphon, exhaled, transformed. Bobbing to azure or sighing past stone, I am spirula, Ram's head, spirula, derided as weak, compliant, forlorn, inhaled through my siphon, exhaled, transformed. One final piece. This poem is called Octopolis, and it is a sequence of cinquains, which is a very fun phrase to say, my goodness. And they are inspired by Ariel's grotto in Disney's The Little Mermaid and anthropogenic detritus, which is a very fancy way of saying human trash. Octopolis. A cracked silver mirror reflects no octopus, its sand-blessed face now blasted and dark. Wriggling copepods, blind to the harvest, swarm on the bars of a vintage metal birdcage. Given your eyeglasses, an octopus would shun the primitive lenses, covet their frames. Gilded candelabra, ardent octopodes recreate your branchial arcs with flesh. See here, little Miss Mermaid, this octopus has one dinglehopper your museum can't claim. Her move, palpitating to the white king, a tentacular caress, checkmate. In an octopus's untrained suckers, swords are more direct and less efficient than beaks. If an hourglass lurked half submerged in white sand, could an octopus measure a minute? Splintered seashells in a nacreous mosaic frame an abalone portrait of you. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you, Rasika. That brings us to the end of our readings. I'd like to thank our audience for joining us. I'd like to thank our generous funders, the volunteers on our organizing committee, of course, our 6 terrific readers, and our musical guest, Troy Witherow, at the intermission. Our next Lit Live Online is going to be Sunday, December 6th at 7:30 p.m., so keep an eye for that. The best place, of course, to look for that is on our Facebook group, the Lit Live Reading Series. So if you haven't already done so, if you join that group. And then I would remind our readers again, if they wouldn't mind, to go and post a link to their books on that Facebook group. That is a great place to go and find the books that you like tonight. At this point, I'm mindful of the fact that we've been going for 2 hours. So we are going to open things up for a Q&A if our readers are willing to hang around for a little bit. But if you do need to leave us, we will understand. Yeah, if there are any questions for our readers or from reader to reader even, feel free to either unmute yourself to ask your question or to put your question in the chat and I will address it to the appropriate person. We have a question for Rasika. Rasika, the question from Conyer Clayton, and she says, what is the tech you are using for voice effects?
So, am I coming through? I don't hear me. There we go. I turned it down just in case. So sorry, one sec. So I'm using, obviously, a microphone. This is your very standard Shure SM58, extremely durable. I have dropped this thing so many times in so many clubs. It is very embarrassing, but also very sturdy. And the vocal effects processor is from TC Helicon, and it's called the Voice Live Touch 2. It has a touchscreen interface with, let me see if I can show it to you actually. So it's quite portable, and it clips onto the mic stand, but you can also put it onto a stand or a table or anything like that. And it has so much functionality. I've been using it for a few years now, and with new projects and new poems and new experiments, I feel like I'm always finding different ways to work with it and ways to really get the most out of it. But the main effects that I'm using today would be, I was using hard tuning in the Spirula Spirula poem for the Nikabi. I'm using what is it called? The mod. And a little bit of reverb, and then the transducer. And these all have a lot of really interesting effects. I find the mod is really useful for creating that sort of underwater panning effect that moves quite quickly, but you can also get your different BPMs going for different speeds, different effects. And one of my favorite things has to be the stutter. It's so much fun. You also have the capacity for looping with this, which I really love. Unfortunately, none of the poems that I was doing today make use of that, but I really like using it for poetry.
Very cool. We have a couple more questions for you, actually, Rasikra. There's one from Gary, and you kind of touched on this, but he says, other than being really cool, how do you think of the processing as being part of the poem?
Oh, this is a good question. Not that they've all been, those are both good questions. So for me, the audio and the performance elements of the poem have basically the same weighting as the page. My intention is for the page to give you everything that the performance would give, and vice versa. When, especially, this is especially true with visual poetry and overlapping lines, italics, different voices. These are not things that I can accomplish very easily with unaugmented speech or without really being very intentional about the page and about the lines and the words and where and how they appear together. So a lot of times I won't necessarily write poems knowing that they'll be performance pieces or that they'll be using certain media or techniques, but in the writing, the performance and the physical embodiment of the poem and its physical expression become intensely important, and they do end up guiding me. Especially exciting when I start to create something and I'm like, I had no idea how I'm actually going to make this one work. How am I going to make it sound? But it's what it needs to be visually, and so the audio will rise to meet it, if that makes sense.
Mm. There's one more question for you, and again, you kind of touched on it. But the question asker asks, did you compose any of the poems in the new collection as sound pieces, or do you add effects to the text after you've first written them?
It's quite interesting. There's definitely been, I'm trying to think which of the ones that, yes, phylogenetics, for example. I'm going to hold it up. So 1 second. You probably just leave that on there so I can do this. So this one, it's kind of inspired by the phylogenetic trees for language or evolution, biological taxonomy, stuff like that. And actually, quite a few of the handwritten poems in this collection began as sound pieces. And oh my goodness, I really need to like sit and interrogate the relationship they're in, because there is a lot there. That's very exciting. Thank you for that question.
Wonderful. Angela, you have a question for Sachi?
I do. Hi, Sachi.
Hi.
Hi. So my question is this: you have a really gorgeous history of launching books and touring in different cities in Canada to promote them, and of course, this year is so bizarre. To have a new book out and the inability to kind of ride along the conventional modes of promotion. How are you finding the experience of Render coming out this autumn in this sense?
Well, can you hear me? Sorry, I switched rooms and switched. I left my deity downstairs, so you can hear me. Okay. Um, I I am kind of grateful that we're in a pandemic because I have a 9-month-old sleeping in the room next door, and the original plan was that I would be on tour right now, and going to at least to the West Coast and kind of making my way back. And I just thought that I would just hand her off to somebody. Like this is before she came. I was like, oh, I'll just hand her off to somebody and she can just be with them during the reading and she'll just like fall asleep with them or something. And it turns out that babies don't really work like that. Although when I was pregnant, I did see a woman come to Toronto and do a reading with her baby in a carrier. So it was like, oh, maybe I can do that. But no, I'm not that kind of parent. So I'm great. I'm really grateful that like once this is over, I can like just close the laptop and go be with her. But it is hard. And maybe Riskira can also speak to this because it's just most of the poetry books like physically change hands and like get into people's hands at readings. And I don't, it's hard because poetry is like it has such a small readership to begin with, that I don't know what's going to happen. But right now it's fine. I like doing this. It's nice to do it like this. Although it's really hard to read a book that's like a really emotionally charged into a computer. I find that it's a lot to have the energy of everybody's bodies in the room kind of with you when you're reading something very emotional, very useful for me. So it's kind of like it's kind of hard to vibrate against nothing. Yeah, that's what I think.
Thank you.
Okay,
Derek, we
there's
have a
more questions for
question
other
for
people.
you here. Eric, it says,
Yes.
such an amazing piece you read. I never thought I'd hear Broussard through Stein. When composing this, are you engaging in processes you know that Stein engaged in? Do you consider it a stream of consciousness kind of piece, or is there more consciousness about the way you're exploring and playing with the grammar of thought in this piece?
I was reading and have been reading a lot of Stein, but it wasn't consciously trying to replicate her style, except for the fact that I got rid of all the punctuation marks except periods. So I didn't want anything other than sentences and no compound sentences. So it's not necessarily stream of consciousness, but allowing for kind of the storytell of memory to kind of pile up. As Gary's just commented, while writing this, I was also editing the collected fiction of B.P. Nicol. So his sentences and his structure and his play, which I guess would flip back to Stein, certainly came up as well. I did try to do things, like I said, to remove commas and semicolons, but also to only use a limited number of pronouns. So everything was he, she, them, I, or you, all the way through to allow that uncertainty of what memory was which kind of pile up as well. So I really appreciate your comments. Thank you, Jason.
Stuart, do you mind to say something about what What spoke to you about that project?
Could you repeat that?
Is that Stuart? I was wondering if Stuart might say something about what led you to publish Derek's poem. What spoke to you in the work?
One of the things is that it was so unlike anything I'd seen by Derek, but I loved the waves of it. I loved the rhythm, the waves. It was so mesmerizing, and there were so many like hairpin turns in it. I thought it was a really exquisite piece, and I was proud to, you know, from a guy who's known so much for visual work and so forth. It was really exciting to publish these long sentences. A real privilege.
Thank you, Stuart. And I'll do the commercial plug as I posted. If anyone's looking for a copy, there's you can order it through the comment stream directly from Stuart for $8 Canadian postage paid. There were 125 copies, and I'm sure they're going, you know, slowly. So order today or tomorrow.
Wonderful. So Chico, you have a question for Angela?
I have a question for Angela. I was just wondering about the composition of the poem that you wrote. You said that you wrote it at a conference, or and so was it just like listening? Was it a listening exercise that you did? And also because it's so multivocal, and I know that you have a history of, or a practice of vocalization and different things, and you read it very quietly. And I'm wondering if that's a function of that it's in the middle of the night in Iceland, or if that was a deliberate choice. So I just want to know about composition and performance of that piece.
Thank you for your question, Sachi. Sachi and I miss each other. We're best of friends, and we haven't seen each other in a very long time. That's why we're being a bit goofy right now. So, yeah, maybe I'll answer the last one first. It might just be that I've got my microphone turned down a bit quietly, though it is getting close to 3 a.m. here right now. So certainly I'm a bit aware of, I think I've got new neighbors actually who've just moved upstairs, and yeah, it could be that I'm keeping somebody awake who's sleeping above. Yes, and then, so yeah, I do think that figured in, and then also not wanting to do too much of a dynamic range in terms of volume shifts with this particular piece, to keep it in a more kind of steady flow that like streams of something. In terms of the piece itself, it was super fascinating to write, because I had been invited by the organizers of this symposium it was their first time trying to run a symposium, and they were like, one of the things we'd like to do is to have a poet as the recordist. So the idea was that I would sit there through every single panel and presentation and performance over 3 days and write. I know I could see the fellow writers in the room are like, and sit there, and I will do something that then at the end, in the very, very last session on the last day, I'm supposed to present them with whatever it is I have done. Show pony. So I, I mean, I entered in like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I love the idea, maybe kind of doing this, but where does one start? So I just really started by, of course, listening, as we all do. And I found it super fascinating to just sit and listen through what everybody was saying. And only at the start was I writing down just the occasional phrases or words that either intrigued me, maybe I knew what they meant, maybe I didn't, or things that I heard were coming up quite a bit. So public policy was being mentioned quite a bit. So eventually I wrote down public policy. The word impotential came up, and I was like, well, I don't really know that one. That's interesting. So I wrote that down. And eventually, I did notice probably around day 2 that notions of streams or networks or rhizomes were appearing quite a bit in different panel discussions. And so that's where I kind of got the idea of doing this. I was having a conversation conversations, you know, like in the off spaces with several people who were present, learning where they were from. And so as I started to figure out more and more what I was doing, I was asking the question of folks, well, how do you say streams in Sami? To the Sapmi performer who was there? How do you say streams in Greenlandic to the visual artist from Nook who was there? And then they would, you know, start to give me these different vocabularies that I could kind of thread in. And so then working through this text, and Gary, I loved your comment earlier, this idea of, you know, it kind of moves into a place of unintelligibility in a sense, or, you know, a kind of imponderable space when we don't understand all of the languages. But there are kind of keys, which it's maybe easier to access when you're on the screen with it, though I think probably it comes through in a spoken sense too, or once we know the form is streams of something over and over and over again, then as soon as it changes to a different word at the start, like bakar or praunde, probably that first word is going to mean streams, just in another language, and the second word will be of, even if it's in another language. So it's like we almost kind of start to learn the word for streams in other languages kind of through the action of moving through the poem and returning to the streams of later. And I like that too quite a bit. I love learning little bits of other languages and then trying to figure out like how to embed keys for access. And also just the attunement process of being aware that like there are other languages than English that are present in the world and that are engaging with very, very serious issues that we're facing around the climate crisis. Thanks, Sachi, for the questions.
Deborah, I wondered if you had any thoughts on that. I noticed there were a couple fragments of French still left in the translations. Yeah, and I guess my question is, do you find there are times where it's helpful to leave things in the original language in the process of translating?
Well, in the case of Audrey Hébert, it's quite particular. She speaks like she writes, I should say, like if anybody's familiar with Montreal or coming here from Montreal, listening in from Montreal, like sort of the youth in Montreal that speak half French, half English, it's very coded in terms of the words that they try to use. So there were cases in her poems or situations where I actually translated the English word into French, or the French word into English, or the way a young Francophone Montrealer might use English interspersed in a French phrase. I'd have to translate the English into actual English. I don't know if that makes any sense, but there's certain words that are used by Francophones in conversation in English, but they don't entirely mean the same thing. Or in some cases, I'd have to change them a little bit because they'd create repetition. So I'm not sure if that's clear or not, but I think it's like it's a cyclical phenomenon here, but it seems to be quite strong in terms of in the past, I think a lot of people here have a lot of Anglophones use French and a lot of Francophones use English in specific ways. But something that's relatively new in the past 5 or 6 years I've noticed is just like people speaking one part of a sentence in full English and one part in French. And not just interspersing all the words, but like a full half of a sentence or a phrase is in English and the other half is in French. And Audrey does this back and forth in the poems, and it's very playful. But I also think that there's an undertone of, I don't want to say it's politicized, because I think that the era of that, well, I guess this is arguable, and probably some of the people listening and know more about this than I do, but I think there's, a lot of French poetry has been pushed and inspired a lot by the politics of language and the fragility of linguistic identity. But I think there's this constant bombardment in her work by English, and English not as a threat necessarily from Westmount, but English as this kind of cultural imperial threat from the US or elsewhere, the language of entertainment and the language of Netflix. And so I think that sometimes it was, she uses it, and I couldn't change it. These are like turns of phrase that come from the States, from certain cultural phenomena. It's one of the reasons why actually I decided to read the long list of women that she decided to canonize, because she has Virginia Woolf, but she also has Lil' Kim, and she has various, rock stars from the States and stuff like that. So I can't actually remember your original question, but I think what I wanted to say was that I tried as hard as possible to keep to the English that she had used interspersed in her poetry, and sometimes had to play with it a little bit, and then sometimes had to choose a French, to put a little bit of a French twist or use some French words, where I felt there was a little bit of tension in her poetry and a sort of frustration with the limits of language that she feels in some ways as a Francophone Montrealer trying to sell her stuff on Kijiji, which isn't fully bilingual, you know what I mean? So a lot of the things that she's talking about in English come maybe from a little bit of a frustration, because even with Law 101 or Bill 101, or being a Francophone here, some of the access to things in your own language are still quite remarkably limited here. They're in English, so you use it because you're forced to. But again, I can't remember if I answered your question completely, but
Totally.
Okay.
Yeah, that notion of multiple Englishes is really fascinating, particularly for, when you would think of it as if more of a linear French to English translation.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give us any examples of English phrases that you needed to tweak that were problematic for your translation?
Trying to think. There are quite a few, and it comes down to some words. Trying to just go through her poems. Some of them I didn't read. But there's one in which I had to sort of, because of repetition, play with the English a little bit. The poem called Spring Cleaning, I decided to say à vendre instead of for sale. I think because most of the audience would understand it, and also understand that she, as a French person, is trying to use this not entirely bilingual site, selling things that she might describe in French, but like you can't change Harry Potter, or you can't change certain brand names. So I think I just tried to throw it in certain places. I mean, that's one small example, just to give readers the idea that she's still a Francophone dealing with this kind of American linguistic industrial complex, and having to decipher it and use it and sell stuff on it. And I think there were a couple of other examples, maybe. The to Google something is now a verb, googler. So translating that into go Google it is not a problem. Which I did, but I can't really find anything at the moment. But yeah, just little examples of that, just trying to remind readers to some extent that this is a Francophone speaking, and who's kind of brushing up against English a little bit. And I don't want to say it's politicized, it's just a phenomenon. I mean, I think Angela mentioned when she was talking about this conference, and inspired to use different languages to kind of remind ourselves as English speakers that there's so much going on elsewhere outside of this global language of English. And, I think in Quebec, it's still a very arguably fragile situation, even for young people, where you can't entirely access culture in your own language. You kind of have to take part in English, even if you resist it a little bit, even if you want to resist it a little bit. But I'd like to hear from others from Montreal, if anybody else, because I know Derek, you must be from Montreal with that long poem.
I am, but we left when I was just a kids, and we're definitely, well, my last name is Francophone. My family is all Anglos, so don't have that same relationship with the city. Mostly my family being there, but certainly the sound of the street, the sound of conversations in the work that you were reading echoed familiar to my own memories being there. And really appreciated your reading. Thank you.
Yeah, wonderful readings from you all. Perhaps we'll leave it there if we don't have any more questions. It's getting late, at least here in Ontario, and I'm sure even more so in Iceland. Yes, wonderful. Thank you all for coming. On behalf of our Lit Live committee, to the readers, to the audience, thank you so much. This has been a great night. And we will see you all back in December, hopefully. Have a good night, all.